الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ما يريد الله ليجعل عليكم من حرج. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: إن الحلال بين وإن الحرام بين وبينهما أمور مشتبهات لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس فمن اتقى الشبهات استبرأ لدينه وعرضه ومن وقع في الشبهات وقع في الحرام. وكما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام: صدق الله العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ما قال ربنا وخالقنا ورازقنا لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي نبي الرحمة كما تحب وترضاه عدد ما تحب وترضاه كلما ذكره الذاكرون وكلما غفل عن ذكره الغافلون. Respected elders, brothers, sisters and friends, the past few weeks, mostly in the first Jummah, but a few times in this Jummah as well, we've spoken about a series of 4 ahadith which Imam Abu Dawood rahmatullahi alayh, he brought as part of his larger connection, Sunan Abi Dawood. Imam Abu Dawood, in his collection, he has about 4,800 hadiths. And he chose these 4,800 ahadiths from 500,000 ahadiths, Imam Abu Dawood. 500,000 hadith, if he presents this to the ummah, they won't know what to do with it. And then, so he said, what can I do that will give a person a beneficial amount? So it's 4,800 hadith. And this book is very famous, one of the famous 6 books of hadith. But then Imam Abu Dawood rahmatullahi alayhi said, from these 4,800 hadith, there's 4. And these 4 are the core of deen. We could say the core 4 ahadith. And in Arabic we say al-ahadith allati yudaru alayha ad-din. Deen revolves around these 4. Because there's principles in these ahadith through which we can live our life in a way that we're successful in dunya and in akhirah. So the first hadith we discussed a few weeks ago, innamal a'malu bin niyat, speaking about intentions. Actions are rewarded based on their intentions. Through that we make sure that our ibadat, our acts of worship are acceptable to Allah. And even those acts of worship that are not necessarily acts of worship, mundane parts of our life, they can become acts of worship as well through niyyah. Then we spoke about the importance of valuing ourselves. Min husni islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'ni. From the excellence of a person's Islam is leaving those things that do not concern them. Because we are time. That's what we have. Time is our biggest asset. And if we waste our time in things that doesn't profit us for the akhirah, then we wouldn't be valuing ourselves. So we spoke about that. The third hadith in this series is the longest out of them. And in this, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he teaches us 2 things. But these 2 things, they're related. One is, how can a person navigate in difficult times when things are not clear? We know that at the end of time, very close to the end of time, the biggest confusion to ever attack or afflict this ummah will occur. And that is the fitna of Dajjal. Dajjal is from the word Dajjal, which means to mix, to confuse, to take truth and evil and somehow mix it and present it to you in a way that you think it's good when it's bad, right? That's the epitome of confusion. But leading up to that, there'll be more confusion. There'll be lesser degrees of confusion leading up to this big confusion. And really, any day that we live that takes us further from the golden age of Islam, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam's life, there will be a little bit more fitna, a little bit more confusion. I'm not just saying this because of myself. Anas radiyallahu ta'ala, he says in the hadith of Shama'il al-Tirmidhi, that we hadn't even finished putting the soil on the body of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Meaning the dirt was still on our hands, yet we felt a change come in our hearts. That day, it was like a physically dark day. Such darkness descended with Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam's worldly life coming to an end. We felt something change within us. And if the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala an felt that, who are you and I? Imam Tirmidhi rahmatullahi alayhi, the famous scholar of hadith, we just talked about Shama'il Tirmidhi. When he was a young man, once there was a woman, and he was very handsome. So this woman was attracted to him. She invited him to something haram. He said, no, astaghfirullah, how could I do this? Later on, when he was older, one day he was making wudu, and he remembered, when I was a young man, that woman, she invited me to haram, and I can't believe I said no. That's the passing thought that came in his mind. Immediately he began to cry and weep and make istighfar, saying, how could I think this? How could this thought even come to my mind? Look at how bad I've become. When I was young, this thought never came into my mind. When he fell asleep, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam came in his dream. We're not talking about the dreams, you establish laws of Sharia or anything from them, but Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Man ra'ani fil manam faqad ra'ani. Whoever's seen me in a dream, they've seen me. And he's a great scholar of hadith. The whole day and his whole life revolves around Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam came in his dream. And he said to him, Abu Isa, at-Tirmidhi rahmatullahi alayhi, he said that, don't feel bad. You haven't become bad, you haven't become misguided. The reason that this thought came to you is that at this age, now that you've gotten older, you're further away from my time. When you were younger, it was closer to my time, so there was more barakah. And as just over the course of your life, you move further away from my lifetime, therefore there's a little bit more fitna, therefore the thoughts are clouded a bit. So this hadith that we're talking about today shows us how to navigate these times. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells us, and again, this is the longest hadith I've heard before. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, Innal halala bayyin. Halal is clear. Okay, so for example, milk is halal, beef is halal, chicken is halal. We don't have ikhtilaf about this, right? These things are halal. Wa innal harama bayyin, and haram is clear. Pork is haram. There's no ikhtilaf here. Alcohol is haram. No ikhtilaf here. وَبَيْنَهُمَا أُمُورٌ مُشْتَبِهَاتٌ. But between the clearly halal and clearly haram, there are umurun mushtabihat. There's doubtful matters. There's a gray area. لَا يَعْلَمُهُنَّ كَثِيرٌ مِّنَ النَّاسِ. Most people don't know about them. The majority of people don't know about them. Now Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he takes us to the second thing. Remember I said the hadith teaches us two things. Number one, it teaches us how to navigate through time, through these difficult, confusing times. Number two is what is the way? The way is through a thing called wara'. Wara' means to, and we'll come to this. فَمَنِ اتَّقَى الشُّبُهَاتِ إِسْتَبْرَأَ لِدِينِهِ وَعِرْضِهِ. The one who stays away from doubtful matters, they've saved, number one, their deen. But along with saving their deen, they've saved their ird, their honor, their respectability, they've saved that as well. Meaning, you're not staying away from haram here. You're staying away from something permissible. This is wara'. That a person has reached such a level that they're willing to abandon things that are permissible or may be permissible to them. Why? Out of fear for their deen. And then Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam gives us another principle. وَمَنْ وَقَعَ فِي الشُّبُهَاتِ. And the one who goes into doubtful matters, وَقَعَ فِي الْحَرَامِ. Surely they'll go into haram. كَالرَّاعِي يَرْعَى حَوْلَ الْحِمَى. Like a shepherd who takes his animals right up to the border of the king's property. You can't cross your animals over to the king's pastures and grazing land. Like a shepherd who takes his animals right to the border. يُوشِكُ أَيَّرْتَعَ فِيهِ. Very soon they'll go over and they'll eat in this prohibited area. أَلَا وَإِنَّ لِكُلِّ مَلِكٍ حِمَى. Now Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam explains the example. He says, verily every king has a restricted area. أَلَا وَإِنَّ حِمَى اللَّهِ مَحَارِمُهُ. Verily the restricted area of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the haram things. And then Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, أَلَا وَإِنَّ فِي الْجَسَدِ مُضْغَةً. Verily in the heart there's a piece of flesh. إِذَا صَلَحَتْ. When that piece of flesh is healthy, صَلَحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّ. The entire body is healthy, spiritually and physically. When your heart is healthy, physically, you'll be a healthy person. If your heart is healthy, you'll be 50 years old and you'll still be okay. You could be 70 years old, you'll be walking around inshallah. But if your heart isn't healthy physically, what will happen? You might be 30 years old and you might not be able to do a lot of things. And spiritually, when a person's heart is spiritually healthy, they'll be good. وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ, and when this piece of flesh, when it's corrupted, فَسَدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّ, the entire body is corrupted. Ala wahiya al-qalb. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, and this is the heart. This piece of flesh, this is the heart. So how does this all go together? This hadith is very comprehensive. Number one, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, halal and haram are clear. There's no ikhtilaf. The majority of things, I would say, they're halal or they're haram. But in between, there's some doubtful matters. They're doubtful either to the average person. So average person, they see it, they don't know. It might be halal, it might be haram. What is the way forward? The way forward is to go ahead and ask somebody who's knowledgeable. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. MashaAllah, we have so many knowledgeable people in the area. Go and ask them. They may tell you, yeah, it's a clear-cut matter. This thing is halal. Go ahead and partake in it, right? But then what may happen is a person, they go online. They're like, I don't know Sheikh so-and-so in the masjid, but I know Sheikh Google. So they go online and they Google. And they see 10 different fatwa. Some say halal, some say haram, some say doubtful, some use different words that the person doesn't understand, like mubah, makruh, this, and the person is getting confused, right? Now what is this? Now there's some doubt about this thing's permissibility. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is telling us that it's better to avoid this thing. Why? Because it will eventually lead a person to haram. If a person has a habit of constantly doing things that are right on the edge, that may or may not be permissible, that so many people are considering to be impermissible, so many ulama are considering to be impermissible, then what's going to happen? It might be that a person one day they actually go and they do something haram. Along with that, a person, when they make the habit of doing every single thing that they want, they won't have any restraint. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they taught us this practically through the month of Ramadan. In Ramadan, what are we not allowed to do? Eat, drink, and have relations with our spouses. These things are absolutely halal at all other times of the year. Eating, drinking, relations with spouses, these things are halal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is training us. At times you have to give up those things that you want in order to teach yourself, to restrain yourself. When you want something, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that it's wrong, you have to be able to stay away from that. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he tells us, this is the hadith of Shu'abul Iman. He says that لا يبلغ العبد أن يكون من المتقين حتى يدع ما لا بأس به. That a person will not ever become a pious person until they leave some things that are permissible. حَذَرًا لِمَا بِهِ الْبَأْسِ. Leaving those things out of fear of those things that may be doubtful. And Hassan radiallahu anh, the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was taught this at a young age. Somebody, they asked him, did you preserve anything from your grandfather? He said, yes, my grandfather told me, دَعْ مَا يَرِيبُكْ إِلَى مَا لَا يُرِيبُ. Right? Leave those things that are doubtful for those things that aren't doubtful. When Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam passed away, Hassan radiallahu anh was 7 years old. This means from childhood, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was instilling to his children, to those around him, that look, there's halal things, go ahead, partake in them. But there's haram things, you have to stay away from them. But we also learn from this hadith, another thing that we have to take away is that a person, they can't live in constant doubt. Because if a person misunderstands this hadith, then they'll say, okay, I'm cautious, I want to stay away from any doubtful matter, therefore everything is haram. A person comes in the masjid, they say that maybe there was a child here and they used the bathroom, therefore I can't pray on the carpet, I have to bring a janimaz, I have to pray on that. You go to a Muslim, a gathering, and the person is a pious person, they bring you food, you say, I'm not sure where this is from, it may be from here, it may be from there. Meaning there's no way for a person to function. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam gives us guidance on this matter as well. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam has, the principle he's given us is if there's no evidence of something, you assume something to be fine. You come into this masjid, you assume that the carpet is fine. You go to a Muslim person's house, you assume that the food that they're giving you is halal, they're a pious person. You know that, right? You assume that everything is fine until there's a doubt. When there's not a doubt, rather some evidence pointing towards the fact that something may be amiss. When that evidence arises, then it's for a person to practice wara. Okay? The other guideline Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam has given us is before asking 100 people things, you have to ask your heart. And inshallah, we'll speak about this, inshallah, in the second part, about asking your heart. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to act upon the halal and stay away from the haram and stay away from the doubtful matters as well. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya'i wal